Hey, it's year 3, so there's new primary weapons available from Trials of Osiris. Let's see how they fare. This video will only be going over them in PvP. While these are solid weapons stat-wise, I personally feel like there are much better options out there for PvE. If there's a specific point about these that can be made in PvE, I'll make it, but chances are you already have a fantastic weapon suited for PvE combat, and these will not bring anything new to the table. Also, all of the adept versions of these guns have snapshot on them. This is a great perk to help snap your gun up to your sights quicker, but it doesn't completely make or break any of these guns. If you can't get to the lighthouse and get an adept version, you aren't missing out on anything huge. Let's start off with arguably the best weapon, Blind Perdition. This is a pulse rifle in the Hawksaw archetype. The suggested loadout is smooth ballistics, hand-laid stock, high caliber rounds, and counterbalance. The reason for smooth ballistics over something like smart drift control is to give you a much higher range stat. It seems contrary, but having a high range stat will actually make your burst more likely to land on the head instead of trying to go all in on stability and making your recoil a laser beam. Ideally, you just want a good balance between the two stats, and this is the most consistent perk choice I've been able to play around with. Counterbalance also helps get that recoil into a more predictable pattern. The gun is entirely possible to use with Outlaw as well, but I found that Counterbalance just made things a little bit more consistent for me personally. High caliber rounds, thanks to the most recent patch, also buffs up the range a little bit and makes your enemies flinch just a little bit more than a normal round. I'll do a video later going over exactly what high caliber rounds does to a weapon. As I stated earlier, Blind Perdition is probably the best weapon of the new primaries. It pairs extremely well with any short or long range loadout, and does a fine job of cleaning up kills or challenging other people in primary fights. There isn't much else to say about it. For me, it's easily in the top 5 legendary weapons to use for any level of PvP right now. The only other primaries that were really able to challenge it were Last Word, Palindrome, Grasp type pulse rifles, Hawksaw type pulse rifles, or Mida. I feel pretty confident in saying that it's on a very even footing with those weapons. Plus, you don't have to farm for a specific role. It's good right out of the box. Up next is the Vision Stone. My suggested loadout with this is Smart Drift Control, Send It, Fitted Stock, and Crowd Control. Smart Drift Control is to help make the bouncy recoil more predictable. Send It helps the rather low range stat, Fitted Stock adds a little bit more stability, and Crowd Control helps you get an edge in fights that have more than one challenger. I've tried using injection mode to make the stability more forgiving, but noticed a heavy damage fall off, and consistency in my precision hits. Also, I suggest using Crowd Control over Rodeo since Rodeo doesn't do anything useful. I know that's a gross oversimplification, but it's kind of true. As far as auto rifles go, Vision Stone performed pretty well. In primary versus primary fights, I was still able to hold my own, but I was losing to some of the better pulse rifles. The high range with Send It actually took some people by surprise, and I was able to keep most of my damage at a range most other auto rifles would have extreme fall-off damage and accuracy. Crowd Control only came into effect maybe once or twice, but it was nice having it when I needed it. The only negative thing about this auto rifle is, well, it's an auto rifle. They're underperforming a little bit in the current meta, so if you equip one, just know that you're fighting an uphill battle. However, of the current auto rifles available, I feel like it's one of the strongest, right up there with Doctrine, Monte Carlo, or the Gvostov. Alright, next up is the Exile Student. This is the fastest rate of fire archetype of hand cannons. I highly suggest you go for maximum range, so smooth ballistics and hammer forged. The other perks are largely up to personal preference, but I went with extended magazine and hidden hand. The way I figure it, this is a higher rate of fire hand cannon, so it's going to be doing less damage. Having one more bullet in the mag can mean the difference between a dead target and a dead me. Hidden hand is also there to add consistency with your shots, since this gun does still have a low range even when spec'd all out for range. I'm going to be brutally honest, this is the worst of the Trials weapons by far. Don't get me wrong, it's still a pretty consistent hand cannon with all its range and aim assist, but it's nothing compared to the Vendor Palindrome. Not to mention, it's a high rate of fire hand cannon, which means you're putting yourself at a big disadvantage in terms of time to kill. To make this gun as consistent as possible, you have to nuke the high stability stat, which ends up putting it in a place where it can't be fired reliably at its suggested rate of fire. Also, you'll probably notice that this is the only weapon so far that doesn't have a neat sight on it. All of the other adept weapons have a fantastic sight that highlights your targets, which can give an edge in primary gunfights. Exile Student lacks that. Unless they change something in the future, I'd just use it as infusion fuel. The final weapon is the Burning Eye. It's a scout rifle in the medium rate of fire archetype, similar to Hung Jury or Visions of Confluence. For perks, I went with Smart Drift Control, Small Bore, Fitted Stock, and Third Eye. You're pretty much wanting to go for max stability, and then Third Eye will just help you with your awareness since this is a slower scout rifle. Why this gun has reinforced barrel is beyond me as well. The base range is already pretty high, and so nuking the stability to buff an already high stat just doesn't make sense to me. I saved this gun for last because it's my personal favorite. I can't really put my finger on it, but it just works well with me. It has great stability, range, reload, and average handling speed. Nothing about it really stands out though, except the sights. The scope is just wonderfully minimal and still gives the highlighting effect as well. I'm completely aware that the Iron Banner Scout is better in almost every possible way for PvP, but I keep getting drawn back to the Burning Eye for some reason. I guess it's just one of those guns that has perfect aesthetics for the way I like to play my hunter. I honestly can't suggest that you use this gun because its perfect time to kill is rather high compared to other scouts. It doesn't do anything impressive compared to the competition. Alright, so there's the current primary weapons from Trials. If you're looking for a good PvP primary, the pulse rifle is absolutely worth grinding for. The rest are all kind of hit and miss though. I hope you found this video helpful. I'll see you next time.